Cool. Hey, thanks everyone for pushing play again on the Cognitive Fitness Coach podcast. I am so thankful for you, and I am super excited for our guest today. This is going to be an interesting one because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what we're going to talk about today, and I'm interested in it. I'm interested in what it can do for me and what it can do for others. So today we're going to be talking to Christina Honkonen, a certified consulting hypnotist, and I'm already crushing it. I pronounced her last name correctly, so I'm so proud of myself. Let me pat myself on the back real quick. And Christina has a very interesting journey from working in marketing and public relations with collaborations in Fortune 500 companies and some of the leading nonprofit organizations across the United States of America. And she now works in hypnotism and specializes in working with athletes and also helping clients address various issues. So we're going to get into how she found herself pursuing certification in hypnotism soon. And I'm really excited to have her here to help us demystify some of the things around this topic and share what we can do with it, like how it can be such a powerful application. So welcome, Christina. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show. How are you?
I'm so good, and thank you. That was a perfect introduction. I'm always impressed when people do those so well, and I'm very glad to be here. So I've listened to the podcast a lot. I've followed your meditation guides and really appreciate the conversations that you're having and everything you're sharing out in the world. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. So can you share a little bit about your life story and what influenced you to pursue hypnosis and mindset training? I always think it's so interesting, these stories of what brings people into these types of professions. I consider this a healing and helping profession. So what's your story? How did you get into this?
Yeah, they really do. You're exactly right. I think I always wonder if that has a lot to do with the fact that when we're in college or even in high school, no one offers these as routes to a profession. So we don't hear about them until later in life. But mine, yes, it is a unique story, as most of them are, to your point. I actually do have a psychology degree. So I started with an interest in mental health and then veered really quickly away from it out of college. I went into journalism, and then, like you mentioned, I went into marketing. And my story sort of starts with my son, who was diagnosed with ADD. And I want to say, I think we've always known that that was something we would face eventually. And we decided, with alongside his pediatrician, when it got to the point, for anybody who knows about what this is like with a child or even personally as an adult, it's always a big, long journey. So you go through ups and downs that ultimately lead you to many various different places. One of them oftentimes is a decision on whether you're going to medicate or not. So we had pushed that off as long as we thought was feasible until he was having challenges in the classroom that, made it abundantly obvious that we needed to take that next step. So I ended up talking with his pediatrician. We were with and we still are, a very traditional pediatric office. There was nothing woo-woo or even holistic about it. And while we were discussing options, and he had already been diagnosed and, gone through the whole survey, and we knew what was next, she said, you can consider a cognitive behavioral therapy. And there are alternatives. CBT was one of them mentioned, and hypnotherapy is what she said, is another alternative that she had been observing a hypnotherapist in the South who had a lot
Mm-hmm.
of success with it. So she was very well acquainted. She was comfortable suggesting it to us. At the
Hmm.
time, I
Yeah.
dismissed it completely. And so and I like to share that because that's how most people feel when they think that their
Right.
child hypnotized. And I mean, sometimes even themselves being hypnotized, certainly a
Right.
child. The feeling is off-putting. It's just not something that you're comfortable with, or not something most parents are comfortable with. I certainly wasn't. I dismissed
Yeah.
it wholeheartedly, really, really quickly. And she looked at me, and I will tell you, when I say I dismissed it, I was like, you could probably visibly see the horror on my face. Like I just was not, I was like, well, I think I thought, hey, we've come so far. And I'm not going to get into the details of that because, it's just a long journey. And I knew that we were ready for medicine. So I'd already accepted that. And I'd been opposing it for a long time, finally accepted this is what we needed. So I was already on that bandwagon. And then I have a pediatrician suggesting hypnosis in front of me. And I'm like, that is crazy. And I'm getting worried. Like, is she going to make us try to hypnotize our child before she gets the medicine? Like I was just, and so she looked at me and thought, I think she quickly saw just like, what? And was like, no. Like if you want to go the, pharmaceutical route, we will go that route. And I was like, yes, that's what we need to do.
And so can I pause this for a second? So I get your like initial reaction of it, but like, what were your thoughts? Does it feel like, I can almost imagine of like, we've come this far and this is what you present to us? Like, are you kidding me? This is what we're going to do?
Well, I mean, in her defense, it was a very holistic conversation. So she did her job well. And I think she should, it led us to a really great place. I'm so thankful that there are pediatricians out there who are willing to have a broader conversation, especially in a practice that is not, a holistic practice. So it's now moving into more mainstream practices. I was unaware of that at the time. I am incredibly thankful for her. But yes, at the time, when you have no starting point for that, you don't have like a stake in the ground where you understand what that really means. It's incredibly off-putting. But they have to that's their responsibility as a practitioner. She's doing her job. She's providing sources that she knows are reputable and work and are effective, can be effective. Not in every single case, but that's, medicine also doesn't work in every single case. So what she's doing is saying, let me give you your options. But yes, at the time I just couldn't imagine choosing to hypnotize my child. That I had no understanding of what that meant. And we moved into medicine really quickly, but I am without her, we would never have gotten here because it planted a little seed in the back of my head. What is that? And I did have, that's the other thing. I did have some knowledge of hypnosis, but my experience, like most people, was a stage hypnosis experience. And that's everyone's experience, right?
Right.
And what I'll say about stage hypnosis is there are a lot of reasons why most will say that it is not a good risk to our industry. It doesn't represent what we do well. And it doesn't. It's very different. It's a stage performance experience, but it can create it has contributed to a lot of stigma around hypnosis. That is all true. It is absolutely true. And there are times when people walk away who opted into that experience and they're up on stage doing things that they wouldn't do otherwise. And it's embarrassing for them. It causes a lot of probably inner turmoil to some extent. And that is not good. But the other side of that coin is that for people like me, you watch something like that and you go, is this real?
Right.
You have that entryway to going, that feels really like nothing I've ever seen before.
Right.
Is that possible? And of course your brain eventually goes to, well, if you can have a football player dancing on stage, doing things they would never do otherwise.
Yes.
What else? What could you do eventually? If you go the path that I went, you start to go, well, how could that be useful from a clinical perspective in a way that could be helpful? So it sort of breaks down the barriers to seeing what it can do for someone. And I can explain what they're doing in stage hypnosis. But for me, I thought, well, I remember that, Was that actually real? I've always wondered if that was actually real because it was so amazing and so shocking, really, to see people that you go to college. For me, it was college. And I knew the people because I was at a small liberal arts school and I couldn't believe it. I just, you had people that he was able to anchor in. Well, first of all, you had people doing things on stage that you'd never see them doing otherwise, acting like monkeys, doing something that wasn't there. And then he was able to anchor in, and this is a very common practice that they do in stage hypnosis, where they'll send everybody back, like you're, done being hypnotized.
Yeah.
They'll bring them out of the hypnosis. out of the trance, they'll go back to their seats, and on the way out, they have actually planted a suggestion where on the way out the door, and this is what happened in the one that I saw, I'm sure it's different elsewhere. On the way out the door, it triggers them to turn around and start pretending like they're drumming. So I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is wild.
This feels like the MK Ultra program or something. Like, what is going on here? And so so that's where it becomes like, it gets stigmatized, is because what you described to me, like, that sounds like unsafe and like disempowering and like, wait a second. So like, is my son gonna be out of control? Like, so you're gonna hypnotize my son and what? Now what? You know, like, so now he like is doing tricks for you in the office? Like, what the hell is going on here? So it's like, but you're right. It does bring up like, wow, this is really powerful, but boy, we need to be using it for good rather than me playing drums and clucking like a chicken.
Exactly. So, and let me just, while we're on that topic, to help make sure I'm contributing to demystifying and not making it stigma worse, let me explain what happens with stage hypnosis. So when this is a hypnotist who's leading the stage experience, this entertainment experience, and they are qualified to do stage hypnosis. Actually, some of them are clinical hypnotists and hypnotherapists. In this case, they are going into a very large group of people, and the people who want to participate are opting in. And one of the things we'll get into later, hypnosis works when someone wants the end result. Okay. It does not work if you do not want what you're asking for, right? If you ask me, you try to hypnotize me to do something that's not along my morals, my values, that's not going to stick for me. So in this case, they're looking for people who are opting in, and then you have to be further qualified, and they do suggestibility tests before you ever see anybody on stage to find. Yes, exactly. And they know all of this. Like, anybody who goes up on the stage, they'll say stand up, and they'll do, maybe a test where you're like taking your arm out in front of you and making it really straight and strong, or there's a bunch of different suggestibility tests that they'll use to qualify a group of people who end up on that stage. So they're opting in. And there's about, I want to say, I'd have to look closely at the research because it's all a little different, but between like 5 and 10, somewhere between like 5 to 20 of people, probably more like 5 to 10, who are very easily hypnotized. So much so that you can bring them to that state where they are in such a deep trance that they follow along with something like a stage hypnosis experience. So you've got to remember that these are people who have selected and elected to participate, and they go on with it to some extent. And then for those who say they don't remember, the hypnotist gives them an option. You can come out of this and not remember, or you can come out of this and remember what happened. So that's right. And so they have an option to either remember or not remember, and they select that, in that trance state. Now, that does not make that all incredibly okay.
Right.
But I do want to add that there's like some contextual details behind how that happens that are important to understand. That these are adults who are electing and selecting to participate. They're highly, highly hypnotizable, and they go along for the ride. They want to be there. So it is different in that way.
I don't know why, but I feel like I would be easily hypnotized. I feel like, because I'm probably like just because I'm so intrigued and interested in it. And then I also feel as though I don't know, I'm on the fence of whether I would want to remember what I did or not remember.
Right.
I probably want to remember because it might be triggering to me to not remember what I did. It would remind me of
that would bother you.
In active alcoholism, where I used to time travel quite often into the future and not remember what happened.
Right, you wouldn't want to lose control like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to feel out of control. Like, that's the thing that like keeps coming back to me, is this feeling of like being out of control, and I don't want that feeling. So I don't want to experience that. So
exactly.
So stage hypnosis, I've learned a lot just now. It's really great. So it's completely different, like, genre. It doesn't, And so let me say, does any of that bleed over into what
Yeah.
they were doing with your son in ADD?
Oh, I mean,
That
the main
come into
concepts
it?
behind being hypnotized are
Yeah.
the same. A stage hypnotist may use different types of inductions. Then they're not going to do a progressive relaxation induction that I would use or clinical
Mm.
hypnotist would use with a client
Okay.
in a clinical setting.
Hmm.
That's just what you do. I'm sure we can get into
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
how it's very similar to meditation.
Yeah.
Um, it's very similar in that you're going to do that classic. And you'll have to tell me how much parallel there is here, but you're going to do a very progressive relaxation where you're imagining a
Yeah.
beautiful white healing light flowing over your head, shoulders. I go a lot slower than this to hypnotize you when we do it, and we go slow. But
Yeah. Yeah.
you're letting all those muscles go, and we're using a
Yeah.
visualization, and it's guided so that you can
Okay.
let everything go. And
Uh-huh.
so the induction process in stage hypnosis, they'll use something classic like look at my finger, and then they'll tell a
Mm.
story, and they'll get you relaxed. But it's real quick. There's rapid inductions that just move. You can take somebody, if you've got somebody who's really highly hypnotizable, they've
Yeah.
opted in, they want to do it, a good stage hypnotist, and this is the art of it too. It's an incredible art. It does take talent. It does take
Mm.
time to be able to do something like this. And they can get you hypnotized in a minute to 5 minutes flat. So, it is phenomenal what they can do, but
Yeah.
in a clinical setting, we're
Yeah.
not. Sometimes I'm sure there are clinical hypnotists and hypnotherapists out there who
Yeah.
might use some of those. And by the way, kids can sometimes love that stuff. So if
Wow.
you're working with a child and you're a good stage hypnotist and you're qualified in a clinical setting as well, it would
Yeah.
make sense that you might use some of that because the kids love it. And your job when
Hmm.
you're working with children is to get them engaged and have fun. Um,
Yeah.
they'll tell you that I've had kids want me to pull out the pendulum, and you go with it. You do what they
Uh,
love because it's for them and they're more intrigued and interested.
uh-huh.
But then
Uh-huh.
ultimately, the difference is once they get into
Yeah.
that trance state, you're
Yeah.
layering in the suggestion that they
Uh-huh.
want to hear to get them where
Yes.
they want to be, whether it's a behavioral
Yeah.
change, emotional change, and most of the time it's both
Yeah.
because of state shift.
So so you've walked us through a little bit of it, but could we just go through it of like what could someone expect if they came to your office and say, "Hey, I want to use hypnotism to work on an issue I'm having with, let's just say, anxiety. Like I
Yeah.
have something coming up and I have a bunch of anxiety around it. Like what would that look like? What would a session look like?"
Yeah. So normally we would talk, there is a level of wanting to talk through what that feels like to them, what that experience is like. I do pair some cognitive behavioral therapy practices with
Mm-hmm.
hypnosis so that when we're creating that new neural pathway, that new way of being, thinking in the world, in this case, feeling bold and vibrant and confident in a speaking environment to the public, we would also be teaching how to do some basic thought stopping. We
Mm-hmm.
talk about how to think in that scenario, and then we're pairing it with a deeper experience and some anchoring too
Mm.
in that deep trance state, so that your
Okay.
body can get online with what your cognitive conscious mind is thinking. But
Mm.
for us, we do a level of talking about the issue combined with the hypnosis, where
Okay.
normally I do a progressive relaxation, and then we layer
Mm-hmm.
in the suggestions for how you want
Mm-hmm.
to experience that, in this case, that public speaking.
Mm.
What does that look like for you? What does that feel like to you? We're
Mm-hmm.
talking as you would imagine, about that confidence. A lot of this, by the way, is visualization paired
Okay.
with the suggestion. So we're using the suggestion, but we're also guiding the client to create a visual. So that leads us into the subconscious mind, which you can talk about a little bit, and
Yeah,
why
yeah.
we want me to go there.
For sure. I love it because I think, what do we think? Like 85% of our thoughts are happening subconsciously. Is that
Yes.
about right?
Yes.
85 to 90? I don't
They
know.
say 85 to 90. Yeah. Yeah.
Really? I nailed it. Wow, that was a guess.
And that's what they say. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really interesting is that the thoughts that come up are just like what we work with, and normally I think the thoughts that come up like are like pretty much the same thoughts day in and day out if we don't work with what's going on underneath with the subconscious. And I think that's where it does parallel. Like with meditation, you're right. I do, some grounding and some relaxation to get the body settled, and then we begin to go into the mind. And depending on where we're at in a meditation journey, it's maybe just increasing focus, increasing awareness with mindfulness meditation, going back and forth between our minds drifting and bringing it back to a chosen object of focus again and again and again and again. And
Yep.
then at some point too, it's also like when I work with clients, and I too bring in some cognitive type restructuring
Yeah,
techniques, and working with mantras reminds me a lot of working
it is.
with hypnosis, where we're putting in these suggestions and trying to get into the subconscious mind so that we can start changing the thoughts that are coming up to the conscious mind. So it's really cool. But yeah,
It
so
is.
let's
In
talk
a
about
lot
the
of ways, it
subconscious
is.
mind.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, I completely agree with you. I would say it is the same thing. It's hypnosis is just a deep meditative state where we're taking someone from that beta brainwave state that you and I are in right now. We're somewhat analytical, judgmental. We're deciding, we have a filter up that's smart, that's deciding what comes in and what stays out. And in hypnosis, and exactly like what you do, all we're doing is moving that mind into this deeply relaxed state. It's a different way of being. We're going from beta down to that theta, alpha theta brainwave state, just a
Mm,
slower place where
mm,
suggestion is more readily accepted by the subconscious mind. But again,
mm.
as long as it's in line with your values, your morals. Yeah. So the subconscious mind, where was I headed with that originally? So the way it works dictates how and what we say in that hypnotic or trance state, and that sort of
Mm.
dictates how some people follow a script. I tend to write some of my own and combine it all up, and it looks different depending on what the person is looking for. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is place in visuals that help. There's both suggestion, right? But you also have to start to visualize and see yourself where
Mm.
you want to be. The subconscious
Yeah.
mind, and really in the conscious mind as well, works in visuals, certainly the
Yes.
subconscious mind more so. So we take that and we also layer in statements that are in the positive. So we're careful about how we talk. And then we're
Mm-hmm.
careful that we're always getting to the win, right? So we want you to
Uh,
see out and play out. I think public speaking is a really great example. You're going to spend the majority of your time in a hypnotic state, both with suggestion, but the majority is going to be visualizing that experience and
yes.
getting really comfortable with it and confident with
Uh-huh.
it and playing it out in a way where you can have that win. We are driven creatures. We want to see ourselves succeed, and we have to have a reason for this. So
Yeah.
I'll take somebody all the way over. And by the way, sometimes we spend a lot of time talking about what is the reason for this, because if you
Uh-huh.
can't get behind it and there isn't really a good reason, we're going to have a really hard time getting to where you want to be. So much
Right.
so that most hypnotists, certainly the ones that I've been trained by, will not work with a smoker who wants to stop unless they have said very clearly, I'm done. I'm done. The only
Huh.
problem here is I can't get my body in line with what my mind wants. That's normally
Okay.
a recipe for success with a smoker who wants to stop.
So,
But
and is
yeah,
that like they need to want to stop for themselves, or does it matter what their
yes,
reasoning is?
they need
Okay.
to want to stop
Or it's
for
like I just
themselves.
want my wife to get off my ass, right?
Exactly.
She's always chewing
Exactly.
me out over my smoking.
That's exactly right. So it can be part of the win, right? But
Uh-huh.
you really need to have, it can be like a part, the envelope of, okay, here I am, I'm a non-smoker. We would literally visualize this in that trance
Yes.
state. What does that feel like? What does that look like? And if it feels good for your wife to be like off your back, of course we're going to incorporate it,
Of
right?
course it
But I
feels
don't know
good.
if that's the only thing you're going to get out of it. I don't know if that's enough of a win. That's really kind of, I guess I shouldn't say no. That would be up to them. you know?
Right.
So,
There you
but
go.
what I'm looking for is a very compelling reason. And I will tell you, I know you're laughing about it because you know this is true. That's probably not going to be enough. You know, you've
Yeah,
really got to have a personal, normally it's going to be a personal reason, you know, like
for
I
sure.
want to be
Yeah.
healthier, I want to feel good, whatever it may be. But if
Yeah.
somebody, the smoker you will say no to as a hypnotist is someone who says that, well, I don't really want to quit, but I really want my wife off my back. Well,
Right.
that's not going to fly. It's going to be a waste of everybody's money, time. So we would just say, come back when you know you want to be
Yeah.
done, because
Yeah.
it's just not going to work. Yeah.
And I like that, visualizing yourself as a person that doesn't smoke. We'll just use that as an example. Like visualizing myself as that healthy person. It reminds me of like identity-based like habit formation, where I'm the type of person now that takes care of themselves. So there's other things that stack on top of that too.
Yeah. And it's a little bit of exposure therapy too, especially in um, in the public speaking experience, and then a lot of other ones too, especially like a phobia or fear. It's
Yeah.
a way to incorporate exposure therapy. And by the way, I know every hypnotist listening to me is going to be like, there is so much more to it. There is so much more to it. There's a lot to the script and what you're saying. And we don't just go like visualize your win and then call it a day. It is a lot of scripting, and it's a lot of, you know, making sure you're both in line with what they want. The suggestions make sense. They're all stated correctly. The story makes it. There's metaphor, but I'm honing in on the visualization because it is a big important part of it, and it helps qualify an individual for sessions that will actually end up successful.
Wow.
But yes, like there is some level of like, especially with a phobia or fear, it's beautiful because you can actually do some level of exposure therapy without like bringing in the snake or bringing in the. You're gonna have to eventually, by the way.
That's what I was gonna say. Do you have a jar of spiders under
exactly?
your
No,
like,
I don't.
Let me go next door to the terrarium. I got this boa constrictor. I'll be right back.
I absolutely do not. But that is what you have to do to get someone comfortable. Ultimately, they, you know, will go out into the world and need to actually experience their fear, you know, in person. But with hypnosis, one of the wonderful things about it is like you can actually do some level of exposure therapy without having to actually go visit the snake quite yet. But you would visualize it in that trance state and getting both. And it normally starts really far away. Like people who have real fears, real phobias, they can't visualize it right away. They don't want to. Right. Yeah. So we work to slowly incorporate it into their world until they are comfortable with it, along with the suggestion. And then ultimately they do have to go out into the world. So you do have to pair your hypnosis experience with real life practice. So if I'm working with somebody who is public speaking, you got to go get on that stage. You got to go do that, you know, step on that stage and practice.
You know what keeps coming to my mind when you talk about public speaking is a suggestion that I'm sure everyone has heard is like, oh, you should imagine the audience naked, and that will help you with your anxiety and your fear. And I was like, I don't know why anybody would ever that would not be helpful.
I've heard imagine them all as babies.
Oh God.
Isn't that funny? You know, I'm glad you're bringing this up because like different things work for different people. And part of our job as a hypnotist is to find out like what does work for you. You know, like your visual for quitting something is going to be very different than someone else's. There are just things people want that others don't.
Yeah. I was an instructor for about 3 years in the Navy, and I used to teach a class of about 24 people, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And I'll tell you what, I never, ever like totally got used to and comfortable with being up on that stage and being the guy that's talking with the PowerPoint behind them. And I know what worked for me I watched, and someone just brought it up to me recently, I watched a TED Talk with Dr. Amy Cuddy, and she talked about power poses. And the Superman pose and the victory pose and all that. And I used to go in the bathroom before every morning before classes. Awesome. I would do that to get myself psyched up. And then, of course, I would study the curriculum too. But then I would come in there like a whirlwind. Like nobody in the audience, I'm sure, had any idea how nervous I was. And
that's incredible.
Oh my God, I did that for 3 years, and I never ever like got used to it. It was such a, it was.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's like
But
it's one of the number one fears is public speaking. Like there's
yeah,
something
it
about it.
is.
Yeah.
It absolutely is. So, but I'm glad, once again, glad you brought that up because it is, public speaking is an interesting one. All of them are fascinating. Everything I work on is literally fascinating. And the people I work with are
Yeah.
just incredible. Anybody who is willing to do what you did, decide that they want to be better, or even if it's not better, I want to feel different, or I want something different that could be better for my life. I mean, these are people who want things for themselves. So you're
Yeah.
starting with somebody who, has gumption, has a lot of power in themselves just to call up and be like, hey, I want to do something different,
Mhm.
so I am very honored and blessed to get to work with people, like you who
Yeah.
are willing to go there and go like, what is this power pose? Let's go try it out. Let's go try something new, because
Right.
ultimately I'm trying to help people get to a place where they can get up on the stage. You may not ever get to that. Like, this means nothing to me. We also have to remember that part of that is a good thing. It
Oh
means
yeah.
you care. And I'm not just talking about you particularly, but like everybody, a
Yeah.
lot of that is, if that went away,
Yep.
let me just ask you, would you have been as good, you or anybody listening, would you have been as good on stage? You
I say
know?
absolutely not. Yeah, because I
Yeah,
wouldn't have prepared. And it's also that anxiety is it's energy, right? It's energy inside
yes,
of me. And without it, like if I had zero, like absolute no anxiety, like I would do nothing with my life. There would
that's
be nothing
exactly right.
driving me.
Yes.
And that's another thing too, is I like to do is the reframing of it, where I say like if like
Excited.
well, I did yeah, I did at the beginning of this podcast where I said I'm so excited to have
Yes.
this guest on. Where the reality is, I've done probably 50 podcasts or something, and I still get anxiety knowing that this is going to go out to an audience and people are
Absolutely.
going to hear this. So I still have anxiety around that, but I don't say like it would have been weird if I came on and said I'm so anxious today
So nervous to be
to have this
here.
guest on. But I really am excited, and
Yeah.
to reframe it though, I think is just another interesting thing. And I like what you said too, is like people that come to hypnosis, like they're, they may be struggling with something, but they could also be people that are like high performers and just looking to get an edge. Like, how can I
Absolutely.
get an edge on my competition? I've got this
Yes.
big event coming up. I got this big conference. I got this big meeting. I got this big sales pitch. I got this big thing coming up. How do I get an edge to make myself that
Yep.
much better? That's wonderful. I
Exactly.
love
Yeah.
it.
Me too.
So, yeah, so with getting an edge, it reminds me of like sports performance. And so I want to take some time right now, if we can, is to take some questions that I got from my audience. And these mainly came from my local running club. But
Love
I thought they were pretty good, though. I mean, they're a silly bunch, but so
it.
I had to rewrite them a little bit. But
Best kind. That's the best kind.
so,
Yeah.
so the
Okay.
first question came from someone, and they want to know that could they be hypnotized to believe that they are a version of a successful elite athlete and take on all of the qualities and mannerisms come race day?
Yes.
That's
I
amazing.
believe that. I believe that that is a yes. And I'll tell you why. Unlike, and this is why I love hypnosis for sports and athletes. First of all, athletes are wonderful to work with. And I bet you can guess why now that I've explained all this, because they know what they want. They know what they want, and
Mm,
they're really clear on where they want to be. Either they're trying to get over an injury, or they're trying to get over a block, or they're trying to take their sport and their performance to the next level. All of
mhm.
those qualify them as a really good, in a really good place to walk into a clinician's office and talk through what do they want to accomplish and how do we get there. But yes, like the beautiful thing about the mind is that it's not dependent, unlike our body, which we either
Mm.
are a really tall, 6 foot, 7 foot person who can go play basketball, or we're 5 feet tall. And that may not be in the cards for us. There's a lot
Yeah.
that does go into having the right body type, the right muscle tone, all of that, to being the right player for the right sport. We know that. But
Hmm.
that's the difference between that and the mind, which we have complete control over in many ways, and we can certainly train to get you where you want to be. So yes, I would say that that's our in a lot of ways, depending on what someone's walking in to do, we are trying to get you to a place in your mind where you can perform at your very best. And I do view every single athlete who walks in my door, who I work with virtually, I view them as somebody who is an elite athlete. I'm going to treat you like that because that's how we get where we want to be. So I will mention real quick, as I get ambitious and excited about this work, I was a competitive child athlete.
Oh, really?
So I was a competitive figure skater from the time I was 6 years old until the time I was around 14, 15.
Wow.
And I was homeschooled for this sport. I competed at the national championship for around 5 years, I want to say. So very highly competitive as a child. And that has absolutely seeped into, hypnosis started as I just explained, with an interest in attention deficit disorder. And certainly I love to do weight loss. I don't know how that happened, but I adore it. It's very fun. But yes, I athletes and sports performance is a passion for sure. And it's something that I'm very comfortable with. And I understand how I would want to be treated as an athlete. And I give that to everybody that I work with.
That's amazing. And I love this because, we talk a lot about, like, in the sports that I enjoy, which is like endurance sports. It's long ultra marathons and such. And people say, oh, it's a mental game. Like, it's all mental. And I'm like, okay, it's all mental. But I'm like, how do I train for that? Like, how do I train to be mentally fit for this event? And I get what they're trying to say is like, oh, it's not like, and I'm like, well, it is physical still too, guys and girls.
Yeah,
like,
of course.
My mental part is like, I'm trying not to let how badly I'm hurting right now get to me so that I stop or I drop out, because there's no doubt that you're going to suffer when you run, say, like, last weekend I ran 2.5 marathons in a row and climbed 18,000 feet. So thank you. And it was all a mental game for sure. I mean, I know what I did, but what would you suggest? Like, what would you suggest during an event? Like, is there anything that could be applied during the event outside of the hypnosis office?
Yeah, absolutely. And what we do in hypnosis is we oftentimes are anchoring in certain feelings of confidence, ability to keep moving so that you can keep that going and you can anchor that confidence, that feeling that, you can continue to run, whatever is your block that you're needing to think and feel at that time. And we place that in the positive, so that you're anchoring that in, that feeling, and you can keep that and access it more readily during the run. And you have on board your subconscious mind as well as your conscious mind that is going, this is insane. I want to stop. The goal is to get you to the point where your body is in line with keeping you going. So that in that case, we would work really distinctly to pull out what it is you need, what is the issue that's going on there, and then what do you want to be thinking in that time to keep you going. And then we're also anchoring in that ability to go, okay, see yourself. We're visualizing you finishing the race to completion, feeling really good, bringing out that power and energy. And then that sort of trickles over into the actual experience. But when I work with an athlete, we're doing an entire mental toughness training program that's comprehensive. So we're working from, with affirmations, short-term goals, long-term goals. We do all of that, build out those affirmations. We're doing little things like every time, you have some sort of saying that is in line with what you need to be doing. That you're reciting to yourself, but that's also anchored into a feeling that you can keep going. You do have the endurance. So we're doing a lot. It's a holistic approach with an athlete. So in that case, it would be multifaceted, but that gives you a general idea of what we do.
And you talk a lot about anchoring positives and positives and positives, but you also do you bring up things that are going to happen, like the negative things that could happen, the speed bumps and the obstacles, and then just how are we going to deal with that? So just being solution focused rather than oh, this hill is so steep
Yeah.
and it's so hard and it's so
Yep.
hot and I'm like I'm so miserable, you know? And that just
Yes.
it's like that's like that seems to amplify. So it's a
That's
lot of
right. And
just
so we would,
things.
in that case, like you and I would talk through what that looks like and feels like, and then we would
Mm-hmm.
incorporate it into the session so that you can
Mm-hmm.
start to feel differently about that
Yeah.
hill, right? It's still going
Yeah.
to be painful. And you're exactly right. We don't ever want to skirt over mistakes that are made in practice, a fall or a bad hit or a
Yeah.
bad, whatever it may be. We want to make sure that we're addressing that. And then what I'll do is trigger in a way for you to get back into the zone. So a lot of
Yes.
this is how do we get into the zone? How do we stay there? And then
Yep.
how, if a mistake is made, if something's getting really, really difficult, I'm
Mm-hmm.
also working with you to make sure that you can quickly get back into the zone. So you're not losing any more time, any more points, any more
Yeah.
whatever it is
Yeah.
that's applicable to your sport. So you're exactly right. And that is a place where if we're not careful and we're just looking at the winning state or having this perfect experience,
Uh-huh.
you're going to fall off the rails really quickly if we don't address that. So you're
Yeah.
exactly right. We have to talk through what does that look like when a
Mm-hmm.
failure happened, a mess up happened,
Mm-hmm.
a fall happens, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then and also what does it look like to move back into that getting in the zone really, really, really quickly? Because that's where you lose someone, an athlete. That's where
Yes.
you lose them.
Yeah.
That fall happens or whatever happens, and you quickly spiral into, well, now I'm going to lose the match. Now
Right.
this is never going
Right.
to end. I'm never going to finish the race. It just goes. And
Right.
if you
Yeah.
have not, that's where mental training will get you back where you need to be really, really quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't know, I guess my techniques were like just like relentless positivity and like kind of like lying to myself in a way of like I knew I was hurting, but I'd be like, oh, I feel great. I've never felt so great. I've never felt so good in my entire
Mhm.
life. Like this is amazing. And
That can
even though I
work.
knew in my mind is like, dude, you are hurting so badly right now. Like
Right,
this hurts so bad. Um,
right.
and then something else I did that maybe you could comment on is it's there's a term for it. I want to say it's Iliism, which is referring to myself in the third person. And
Yes.
that was really interesting. And this is like actually the first race I've done that, where I do like positive mantras in my head and affirmations and such, but I was doing it in the third person, which was interesting because it kind of gave me some standoff distance from what was going on. And I repeated like something over and over of like Chris Norris is the type of guy that finishes things. Chris Norris is the type of guy
Yes.
that finishes
Ooh,
things. I probably
yeah,
said that 10,000 times in my
yeah,
head, and it got
yeah,
me to the
yeah.
finish line. Even when there was times when I
I am
didn't
a
want to quit.
huge fan. Well done.
Thank you.
Well done. Yeah. I mean, it isn't easy. Like all of this is the thing. Like hypnosis makes things easier. Absolutely. That is part of the point of them. But at the end of
Yeah.
the day, you have to do the work, and we have to be willing to look at ourselves in third person. We have to be willing to pull out these parts of ourselves and dissect them and discuss them and look at them differently. For some people,
Yeah.
that's less so, or it's quicker. For others, it's harder. But yes, being willing and open to let me see what works.
Yes.
You find more there as you clearly did, especially in a race, especially in something that's high endurance, really challenging.
Yeah.
That gives you a chance to see what you're made of, as like corny as that phrase
Yes.
is. But when people
No.
say, see what you're made of, it looks like what you just described. It looks like I
Mm.
am the type of person who can talk to myself in third person. That's not that it does it seriously. I am capable of stepping out of myself and
Right.
telling myself what I'm capable of. That in and of itself, some people never discover that about themselves.
Right.
So that's, and I know there's a million things I'm sure you could say about the experience, but that's just, I think that's a really great example of what people talk about when they talk about the incredible things that can happen because of a sport.
Yeah, that's cool. Another question from the audience was, is there any self-help hypnosis techniques to deal with sleepless nights before a major sporting event, because that's very common, is folks
Yes.
run through the event in their head all, at least
Yeah.
I do. Let me just speak for myself. Let me speak in I
Yeah.
statements. I
Yes.
I run through the event in my head over and over the night before, and whether it's a negativity bias of the mind or what have you, I tend to think of like the things that may go wrong and how much it's
Mm,
going to hurt and so on and so
yep.
forth. And then, of course, that stirs up a bunch of anxiety in me. And then I end up
Yep.
not being able to sleep well the night before the event. And I get 2 hours of sleep and then go out and run for 30 hours. It's probably not the best thing for me. So anything I could do to help myself the night before an event to get
Yeah.
a good night of sleep.
Um, yes. So there's a lot that I'm sure there's a lot you can do. One of the ideas that comes to mind for me is this is where, by the way, I have to say, like working with a hypnotist is a great idea because they're going to create an audio for you. Most of them do. I certainly do. An audio for you that you can listen to the night before you're going into your race. You can also have a separate audio that's just helping you get to sleep, you know? So those are wonderful. If you don't have access to that or haven't like set that infrastructure up for yourself, you can always create your own. You could,
Hmm.
you know, take your phone out and talk through what you want, you want to hear. But then in that race night, you've got the nerves. It's just too much of an ask to have you
Hmm.
go visualize everything being perfect. If you know that
Hmm.
about yourself, get ahead of it and go, okay, well, before I'm there in that night before, right now I'm feeling great, right? So let me like pull out my phone, record it, and tell myself exactly what I want to be thinking. So it would be, you know, and the race goes perfectly, just blah, 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 blah.
Hmm.
You're going to create something that's more effective and more positive in that state of mind than you're going to
Hmm.
create the night of. So that's an option. And then there are a lot of, you know, meditations out there that you can listen to
Hmm.
get your mind. This is where I'm right there with you.
Hmm.
Sometimes, even when I'm doing, you can do self hypnosis too. And I always teach that. But, you know, sometimes when you're just too nervous, it's just too much of an ask to sit there and go, let me visualize everything going perfectly well. And
Hmm.
that's where you pull in pre-recorded audios, pre-recorded meditations, you know, put something in your ears that
Yes.
you don't have to lift a finger and it's gonna get in there because you have to listen to it. So sort of a
Yeah.
forced activity.
So I know visualizations are really important in all of this. So visualizing how it's going to go and visualizing things working out the way I want them to. But I think also I already touched on a little bit was like visualizing what's going to happen if things start going wrong and how I'm going to get
Yeah.
back into the zone. And then like would it be too strange to say like could I listen to something while I'm in the sport itself? Like come race day, again going back to like endurance running, would it be okay to like throw in a recording that I'm going to listen to during the race?
Yeah, 100%. It just depends on the person and, of course, what's allowed in your sport. So a
Right.
lot of sports that's not allowed. But if it is allowed and that feels good to you, and I would practice that before race day, especially if you're a competitive runner and you have expectations for your time, then you'd want to make sure that that works well for you. It's not hindering you. But if it's a help to you and legal and allowed in your sport, then a
Yeah.
100%, I would take every advantage I can. And it's hard to beat having someone in your head where it's taking the weight off of you so that you, as long as it
Mm.
works well for you and that doesn't feel distracting, it feels helpful to you and it's
Yeah.
working in that scenario. That's a hard, like it'd be hard to go, oh no, why don't you go use up all that mind power and that energy that it's going to take for you to force yourself to think positively. If you can put it in your earbuds and have it there and that works well
Mm.
for you, yes, go for it.
Oh my. I know I don't listen to music at all when I run, but I might start doing it
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
I'll start listening to the sound of my own voice telling me how
Exactly.
they're going. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Um, cool. And so I was gonna ask a question from the audience if someone said like they wanted to know if this other person could be hypnotized into not liking their super sugary treat. because our friend John, he really likes his cocoa after we run. But now I already know the answers. The answer is no. John cannot because he doesn't want to be. He said no. He said like he's like, don't take
He said,
that away from me.
yes,
So he
yep,
can't be. He can't be. You can't be hypnotized if you don't want to be.
no.
Okay.
You could maybe do it for like a very short period of time, maybe if he was like willing to let it in. But if he
Ah,
ultimately wanted the food,
yeah.
then no, that's not going to work. And it won't work if he's like, don't hypnotize me. You can't really hypnotize somebody who doesn't want to be hypnotized. I mean, it's
Right.
just, they did so much research on this and it just doesn't work. You know, we
Mm.
would be using hypnosis in a totally different way, you know, in a lot of different aspects of government and, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
different ways. But we can't, that doesn't work that way. So it has to be something you want. But if he wanted to stop eating the sugary foods,
Yeah.
yes, it can be very, very effective for that. No, he's good.
Yeah. He has no interest. He doesn't want to at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, like I'm such a fan right now of all of us recognizing what's working for us and letting
Mhm.
it be. You know,
Yeah.
we deserve as humans to have a piece of cake. We deserve as
Yeah.
humans to have things that we love in life that give us happiness.
Hmm.
Not everything has to be hypnotized away.
Yeah.
In fact, I really like to spend a good amount of time going like, what is the issue here? What of this can you keep comfortably and that's good for you? And
Mm.
what is honestly something that needs to change to create better relationships? My question is always like, what helps you create a better relationship with the people in your life and also with yourself? And if it's getting in the way
Mm.
of that, then it's game for us to, you know, hypnotize away.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
otherwise, you know, we want to leave room for the joys of life. So
Yeah. I love that. Let me ask you a couple of opinion questions. So, what is something in mindset training that people are not talking about enough, in your opinion?
yeah, there is a big movement right now, and I'm sure you see this too, to talk about movement sort of
Mm.
independently of mental thought process as a
Mm.
solution. And
Hmm.
I am a really big fan of movement, of course.
Hmm.
But we have to be careful that, you know, if you're doing everything, it's just so individual. So for
Mm.
somebody who is thinking, doing all this mental practice, but not working out and not moving, well, obviously that's going to make a huge difference for them if we take them from sedentary to moving
Hmm.
regularly or building mass and building muscle.
Hmm.
But there's a lot out there right now that I'm seeing that's like, just do this little practice and it'll get your nervous system in line.
Right.
I have a hard time, and I'll just speak personally. I have a hard
Okay.
time getting my nervous system in line and calm down by just doing movement alone. That does not work
Hmm.
for me. So it has to come alongside a slight shift in thought process for those two things to work well together. So huge fan
Okay.
of movement. I would just say, like everything, it's a big holistic conversation. And that's also more of a testament to online and social media being a place where it's
Hmm.
just hard to have those big conversations that are do all of these different practices and therapies justice. So we are
Right.
stuck sort of putting little things out into the world that really deserve a broader conversation. And that's just
Mm.
hard to do. So I don't think it's anyone's fault, but that's the thing I've been seeing lately where I'm like, ooh, you know, we just need to be careful that we're not telling somebody that they can go, you know, align their chakras and we're going to be done. You know, it's just not that
Right.
simple.
Right. So I'm going to give you this another question is like the opposite of that question. So what is something in mindset training that people are too concerned with and talking about too much? Would that kind of be the same answer?
Yeah, it might be. I mean, I don't know. I do like have a tendency to be really appreciative of everything everyone's trying.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know that I see anything that I'm like, I don't love anyone going, especially like a therapist, and
Yeah.
for all these reasons, like going negative, or I just think it's incredibly
Hmm.
unhelpful. But I see that so rarely that I would not call that, you know, a
Right.
problem. I think people, you don't really understand necessarily until you get into this work how this like makes me laugh to say it this way. I'm sure there's a better way to say it, but like how precious the mind is.
Mm.
How delicate it is and how sensitive people are. I don't care who you are. And
Mm.
so we just have to be careful about what we do and what we say, because at the end of
Mm.
the day, this is what I would leave people with, like, two things. One is, you're hypnotizing everyone around you, whether you like it or not.
Oh boy.
What you say matters. Absolutely, it gives me chills. Yes, that's one of the things you learn in hypnosis, is that the way you say things and what you say matters. It matters a lot.
Mm.
And it
Mm.
hurts people and it leaves scars.
Mm.
And the opposite is true. You know, you have an
Yeah.
opportunity to build people up, and you have an opportunity to make someone's life better,
Right.
So this is not like, being a hypnotist is the job of every single human on this earth. I really believe that, because what we
Wow.
say affects everyone, and we do need to be careful, because I get to see the people who have been very traumatized and very hurt. Real trauma I leave to the therapist, but people who are sad and hurt and depressed. And you do see another side of humanity when you witness that regularly, and you realize how much it really is the responsibility of everyone to do people justice. So
Wow. Well said. That was really good. That was a moment there. You had me. You had me. Like I
sorry,
cried.
I didn't expect that. You made me do it.
I've cried like almost every podcast in like
I
the
believe
last
it.
couple of
You do
years. Like,
such a great
oh
job.
my gosh. Like you got me. Like my hair's standing up. Oh boy.
I mean, I wasn't expecting that either. That's your fault, actually.
Yeah.
You got me there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's so true. Is like, and the opposite is true. Like people will always remember like how they felt by like your words or your actions towards them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's important to be kind to each other in this world.
Yeah.
And,
And thoughtful.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So the only other thing I was going to mention is, I know I threw around the word positive a lot. And what I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to explain that in the world of hypnosis, and now in your world, because I'm sharing it with everybody, we say positive, but what we really mean is stating things in the positive, not hunky dory, everything's fine, positive.
Okay.
So the subconscious mind, and really the conscious mind too, it does work in visuals, but it also works with positive words more effectively. And some people will say, some hypnotists will actually tell you the subconscious mind doesn't understand negative words.
Hmm.
Now, what I would tell you is this: it just doesn't understand them easily, and it causes problems and confusion more than it is helpful. And the easiest way to say that is to ask a question. So if I ask you to not think, please do not think of pink elephants. Don't think of
Yeah.
pink elephants. What are you thinking about?
Yeah. Little pink elephants
Yeah. Are they little? Are they
everywhere.
cute?
Yeah, they're adorable. I love them. I already have names for them.
I love that, because my pink elephant is like really big. So,
No,
okay. So
there
you
used
think
to be a large pink elephant in the room whenever I walked in, but it's gotten substantially smaller over the years.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, you're right. So instead of saying don't, it's
Exactly.
do. Do
Yes.
think of this.
Yes. So
Do think of
I've
that.
thrown that word around so much, and I should have explained it earlier on. What I mean is, if I don't want to drink too much coffee, I'm not going to
Uh-huh.
say don't drink too much coffee. I'm going to tell
Yes.
myself, you drink a lot of water and a half a cup of coffee. Okay, so and by the way, this takes some work, and people
Yes.
think, like, I'm just going to think positive, and when I find out what they think is positive, it's not working. That is not what the subconscious mind will read as a positive.
Uh-huh.
They're going to they'll say, but I do think positive. I tell myself not to drink the coffee. Okay,
Yes.
what's happening there is that your brain is pulling up the coffee, and we have to remember, every single thought creates a biological change in your body.
Ooh.
So if I pull up, just imagine like biting into a lemon. Okay. If you
Mhm.
really, and I do this with clients, if you sit back and relax and really imagine that, you're going to have saliva build up, you're going to
Yeah.
feel, you're going to taste it, you're going to see it. Okay. So if I imagine, don't bring up that coffee, well, I've got it in my head now, and
Mm-hmm.
every part of my body is now driving me to want
Yes.
that coffee. I have single-handedly made this far harder for myself.
Right.
So, and especially with cake, that's a really good example for people who want to lose weight. So if I bring up the cake, I don't eat cake. Well, I brought up
Mm-hmm.
the visual of the cake in my
Right.
mind, whether I realize it or not, that's the way the mind works. So you bring
Mm-hmm.
up that cake, and now your body is driving you physically to
Yes.
want. So when I work with people, that's what I mean by positive. We're going to
Yes.
go, I love vegetable. It's going to be very distinct for them, what they actually love. I love that yogurt with berries and honey and whatever it is. And we're
Mm-hmm.
replacing all those positives, become something that's actually going to be physically helpful to getting you where you want to be. So
Nice.
that's important. And where are we on time? Because I want to talk more. Let's talk
Oh, it's
about.
okay. No, don't worry about it.
Okay.
We got all the time in the
Are you
world.
sure? Okay. The only other thing I'm going to mention while we're on that topic of why we phrase things positively and what that looks like literally, is also the idea and the concept that when we think negatively, and it could be something small, it could be something big. For each of us, it's different. So, whatever that trigger is, we move
Mm-hmm.
ourselves into fight or flight. And
Yes.
when that happens, we are flooding our bodies with adrenaline and cortisol.
Yep.
Both of those things make it difficult for us. We're basically handicapping our minds. We can't think
Mm.
clearly. We can't function properly. We don't make decisions from a good place. We definitely can't be thinking about a good visual of where we're gonna land and what we're gonna do successfully. All of those things make it hard to get where we want to go. So that's another reason why we're going to be careful about making sure we're thinking about those things in the positive, and we have techniques and
Mm-hmm.
support to get us out of that negative loop. Okay, that's
Yeah.
the reason why we're pushed into fight or flight really quickly,
Mm-hmm.
and then all those negative hormones come up. So for all those reasons,
Mm-hmm.
we want to move into a place where we have some level of adrenaline, a healthy level of adrenaline, the excitement
Yes.
that you talked about earlier, right? So we're not going to
Yes.
get rid of that. But we don't want to go to a place where we're creating inner illness, because if you are constantly having cortisol and adrenaline flooding your body, you're going to create some level of illness, or you can.
Yes.
And you're certainly not creating good, positive hormones that can get you to a place where you're successful and doing the things you want to do.
I love it. I didn't realize, but I use a form of hypnosis with my daughter just a little while ago. We were at the park behind our house, and rather than stating the thing that she doesn't want, I state the thing that she wants to continue doing.
Yes.
So I say,
Awesome.
hey, we have 15 minutes left to play. And she's like,
Yep.
play? And she smiles. Rather than
Yes.
saying, in 15 minutes, we're leaving. She's like, leaving? No, no, no. So
Mm-hmm.
I
I
didn't
love
realize
it.
I was doing that.
Yes, I mean with kids. So I'm glad you brought up kids too.
Yeah.
Kids are so fascinating when it comes to
Hmm.
hypnosis. For one thing, kids are almost before the age of 7. I want to say probably a little bit dependent on the child. Roughly the age of 7, they're always in that alpha state of mind. So they're essentially
Mm.
hypnotizable from the time they're born. Well, not quite there yet, but 2 years old, whatever it may be, to 7,
Oh,
where
wow.
you can actually, what you're saying, that's why that works so well with a child, is because they're
Yes.
all, how old is she?
She is 3.
Yeah. So that works really well with a child because they're already in a hypnotic state of mind. And when I tell you, like, you're hypnotizing everybody, we're moving in and out of that state of mind all day long. So that
Yeah.
trance state is for an adult. You're gonna experience that when you're drifting off to sleep and when you're waking up. And then you
Uh-huh.
oftentimes, when you get lost in a book, when you're watching a movie and you feel like you're there, that's why it works.
Wow.
Movies work well. And with kids, they're and then as they get older, they're still in that a lot more. Like, have you ever seen a kid just like sort of dazing off? They're not really with
Yeah.
you. They're in that
Hmm.
state of mind a lot more often. So how you talk to them, stating those things in the positive, getting rid of those negative words, doing exactly what you just said you do, is
Hmm.
going to be very effective, far more effective than, the opposite, which you described as well. So.
Yeah. Wow. That's really fascinating to me. And it just, again, brings up the point of like how it's so important what we're saying to our kids during those formative years. And
Mhm.
also, really important is I'm so open to suggestion and such during the minutes before sleep and after sleep is why we need
Yes.
to stay away from. I'm glad I don't have my cell phone near me because I was going to show you my cell phone, but I'm kind of proud of myself that it's not here.
Yeah, yeah.
Many people drift off to sleep, and the last thing they see is probably something on the bad news flashlight, as I call it, the the cell
It's
phone. And
100%.
maybe
And
it's the thing they grab in the morning too, because it's their alarm is on that, and I got it in my hand, so I might as well check the news or what have you, or check social media. Wow.
that moves us into that, oftentimes can move us into that fight or flight where we're then
Gosh.
combating all these negative hormones. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's no way to start or finish your day. That's for sure.
Right. Right. When
Cool.
it comes to kids, by the way, for anyone listening, because I sort of like started that conversation with my son,
Hmm.
I think to do that story justice and to be fair to him, it's worth explaining that my son was very self-motivated at that point. So,
Mm.
by the way, the medicine did not work for him. So,
Okay.
it worked well for a long time. And then he did not like what it was doing to him emotionally and physically. So
Hmm.
that's why we had to transition away from the medicine. And he wanted to try and use hypnosis. So,
Okay.
and it was for us, we used an audio, and he still does it. Sometimes he doesn't do it a whole lot right now, whenever he wants to do it. And we use it for a sport too. Sports, by the way, is a great place to start hypnosis with a child, because if they
Mm.
want to, because you can you can make the hypnosis experience about the sport, and then trickle in under that the school performance, it's academic
Mm.
performance within that. That works well, and it gets them excited. So it
Yeah.
won't. So for me and for my child, he was self-motivated. He wanted that experience. That's why it was successful for him. He also
Mm.
had this very big support system, a teacher who was willing to bend over backwards for him, who motivated him to get to a place where he wanted academic performance. That's where it starts. Just like anybody who walks in my door, adult or child, someone comes along. It isn't just, it's easy to go, oh my gosh, hypnosis helped me quit smoking. And it's true.
Mhm.
There's story after story about a 10-year, 20-year smoker coming in for one hypnosis session. And normally it takes more, but there are
Mm.
stories that it's one session and they never smoke again. But you've got to remember, this is somebody with a big, broad past of getting to a place where they wanted to quit.
Right.
And that is
Right.
just as magical, just as amazing as the one session, one and done. And so for
Yeah.
my son, it was, and anybody who walks in my door, there's a story of getting them mentally themselves getting to a place where they've done some level of self-hypnosis, whether they realize it or not, to get to a
Mm.
place where they want something better and different for themselves. So just add all
Awesome.
that, because it's context is everything.
Yeah, cool. Appreciate all that. So, um, I normally end the podcast by asking a question that I stole from Tim Ferriss. So, Tim
Love
Ferriss, if you're ever listening to this podcast, nice to have you tuning in, taking some time out of
it.
your busy day. But it's the billboard question. So, the billboard question is, if you could have a billboard anywhere in the world, it can say anything on it. It can even have images on it. It can be a quote, maybe from yourself or from somebody else. But 1 billion people are going to see that billboard. What's it going to say? What's going to be on your
Mm.
billboard?
Wow, that's a good one.
That's why I stole it.
I love it. Um, Gosh, I'm thinking like something that motivates people to action.
Okay.
Um, in other contexts of life, if we were talking on different topics, I would say something different. But
Okay.
what right now, based on this conversation, I would say something like, is it one word or two?
You can have as many words as you want. It's a giant
I would
billboard.
say I would say hypnotize yourself. That's what I would say.
Okay. Cool. I love that.
And now I'm sure later I'll come up with something much better than that, but that's what I would say right now. Hypnotize yourself, because I think it would drive people to go like, what do you mean by that? What does that look like? And
Right.
it
It's
leads you
very
down a path
intriguing.
to, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, cool. So I don't want to forget because I've forgotten this in the past. Where can people find you? Where's the best place if they
Hey,
want to know more about hypnotism and more about yourself and possibly become a future client?
yeah. So I would also just add that there is a lot of research out there. Stanford does a lot of research around hypnosis. And so if you're interested in it from an academic perspective and a research perspective, I would start there.
Okay.
Dr. David Spiegel is a wonderful spokesperson for the industry, and there's a lot of podcasts that he is part of out in the world. And then as far as myself, I'm available at honkonenhypnosis.com. And I know if you can say that last name, I'm always impressed. Good job to you, Chris.
Thank you so much.
And you don't have to say it. So it's just my last name, honkonenhypnosis.com. And there you can learn a little bit more about me. I think I've said it all here. But then you can book with me. You can learn about my sessions and what that looks like.
Cool. I will get Stanford's Dr. Dan Spiegel. Is that the name? Spiegel?
Dr. David Spiegel. Yeah.
Okay. David, not Dan. Okay. I'll get that linked in the show notes, and I'll also get your website in the show notes, and maybe your Instagram as well. Is that a good place?
Yes, Instagram would be great. I welcome people on Instagram. I do little videos that are probably, to my point earlier, too short and not hopefully not misleading. I try my best, but yes, Instagram is a great place to connect.
Yeah, that's where we were connected, and I really enjoy your content.
Yes,
and it's been great. So
yeah,
cool.
I'm glad. I love your content too. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yes.
Cool. Well, thank you again for taking time out of your morning and talking to us. And I learned a lot, and I really enjoyed the conversation. So thanks again.
Thank you so much, Chris. It was a joy.
Cool.